Hello viewers, welcome to Dr. NGP Arts and Science College Teaching and Learning YouTube channel. I am D. Sundar, Assistant Professor, Department of Mathematics. We discuss about chi-square test. The chi-square test is applied in statistics to test the goodness of fit. Now we are going to see the meaning of chi-square test, characteristics of chi-square test, assumptions, degrees of freedom, uses, formula, steps involved chi-square test and conclusion. Meaning of chi-square test. First one, chi-square test is a non-parametric test because any parameter does not contain in the chi-square test. By using the formula chi-square equal to summation of observed frequency minus expected frequency whole square divided by expected frequency. Only by using two frequency, observed and expected frequency. Any parameter does not contain in the formula. So, chi-square test is a non-parametric test. Point number 2. Chi-square test was introduced by Karl Pearson as a test of association. This test is used to measure the difference between observed frequency and the expected frequency. Last one. It is a statistical test tool commonly used for testing independence and goodness of fit. Characteristics of chi-square test. First one, test is based on events or frequencies, whereas in theoretical distribution, the test is based on mean and standard deviation. Point number 2, to draw inferences, this test is applied specially testing the hypothesis but not useful for estimation. Point number 3, the test can be used between the entire act of observed and expected frequencies. Point number 4, for every increase in the number of degrees of freedom, a new chi-square distribution is formed. Last point, it is a general purpose test and as such is highly useful in research. Assumptions of chi-square test. First one, all the observations must be independent. By definition of independent, the two events are said to be independent if occurrence of any one of the event does not affect the occurrence of the other events. For example, a coin is tossed twice. First trial getting head and the second trial getting tail. The second trial is not dependent on the first trial. So the both events are independent events. So all the observations must be independent. Point number 2, all the events must be mutually exclusive. First, by definition of mutually exclusive events, two events cannot occur simultaneously or mutually exclusive events. For example, when we roll a die, the events of getting odd numbers and even numbers are mutually exclusive events. Point number 3, there must be large observations. In a sample size is greater than or equal to 30. The largest sample, the sample size should be greater than or equal to 30. There must be a large observations in a chi-square test. Point number 4, for comparison purposes, the data must be in original units. Degrees of freedom of chi-square test. When we compare the computed value of chi-square with the table value, the degrees of freedom is evident. V equal to n minus k. V means number of degrees of freedom. K means number of independent constraints. N means number of frequency classes. For a contingency table, 2 by 2 table, the degrees of freedom is V equal to C minus 1 into R minus 1. C means number of columns. R means number of rows. 2 minus 1 into 2 minus 1. Multiply 1 into 1 is equal to 1. Next, we are going to see uses of chi-square test. Karl Pearson has developed a method to test the difference between the theoretical value, that is hypothesis, and the observed value. The test is done by comparing the computed value with the table value of chi-square for the desired degrees of freedom. What is EG? E dot G. What is EG? Why used EG for example? EG means example. Why used EG for example? Anybody answer? EG means exempli gratia. EXEMPLI. Exempli gratia. GRATIA. EG. அதான் நம்ம எக்ஸாம்பிளா யூஸ் பண்றோம். EG means exempli gratia. Exempli first letter E, the first letter of gratia G, that is EG. Why used it? That is IE. Anybody answer? IE means that is. I means I test. IE means I test. ID space EST. The first letter ID I, EST of first letter E. IE. IE means that is. The both notations EG and IE are Latin word. Any notation or symbol used in either Greek or Latin word. In a mathematical notation, chi-square. Chi-square is a Greek letter. A Greek letter chi-square. Chi-square is used to describe the magnitude of difference between the fact and the theory. Formula of chi-square test. The chi-square may be defined as chi-square equal to summation of O minus E whole square by E. That is, chi-square equal to sum of the observed frequency minus expected frequency whole square by expected frequency. O means observed frequencies, E means expected frequencies. The steps of chi-square test. First one, a hypothesis is established along with the significance level. Hypothesis means our assumption. Our assumption may be positive or negative. That is hypothesis. A hypothesis established along with the significance level. Compute deviations between observed value and the expected value. That is O minus E. O means observed value. That is observed frequency. E means expected value. That is expected frequency. The difference of observed and the expected frequency. Next, point number 3. Square the deviation calculated. O minus E whole square. Observed frequency minus expected frequency whole square. Point number 4. Divide the O minus E whole square by its expected frequency. O minus E whole square by E. Point number 5. Add all the values obtained in step 4. That is, chi-square equal to summation of observed frequency minus expected frequency whole square by expected frequency. Point number 6. Find the value of chi-square from chi-square table at a certain level of significance at a 5% level. Finally, the conclusion of chi-square test. There are 3 conclusion of chi-square test. First one, if the calculated value of chi-square is greater than the tabled value of chi-square at a certain level of significance, we reject the hypothesis. The calculated value is greater than table value, then reject the hypothesis. Second one, if the computed value of chi-square value is 0, then the observed value and the expected values completely coincide. It means if observed frequency and the expected frequency are equal, then the corresponding chi-square test must be 0. Last one, if the computed value of chi-square is less than the table value at a certain level of significance, we accept the hypothesis. The calculated value of chi-square is less than table value, then we accept the hypothesis. For example, in 2 by 2 contingency table, the degrees of freedom is number of rows minus 1 into number of columns minus 1. In 2 by 2 contingency table, number of rows equal to 2, number of columns equal to 2. 2 minus 1 into 2 minus 1. 1 into 1 is equal to 1. In 2 by 2 contingency table, the degrees of freedom is 1. The table value of chi-square for 1 degrees of freedom at 5% level of significance is 3.841. In a nutshell, meaning of chi-square test, characteristics of chi-square test, assumptions, the degrees of freedom, uses, formula, steps, and conclusion. All of you, thank you.